Nerdy Girl Reviews, and we are reviewing Run the World, currently streaming on Starz. Stay tuned for the full commentary. If you'd like to see more of my recaps, you can find me here on YouTube, or you can also click on sofritoforyoursoul.com. Now stay tuned. Let's get into this. How dope is this? How dope is this thing? You have to watch this show. Let's get into it. Now let me start by saying that the soundtrack is incredible for this show, Run the World. Essentially it is a dramedy. More comedy than drama, but nonetheless, I can't stress enough how stories like this, I just click better with stories like this. It's the closest to seeing myself. We have 4 college-educated women, living in these parts of Harlem, of New York in general, that has cultivated black culture. And it can happen, it can honestly be documented in any part of New York, but have we necessarily seen it? No. So I think I resonate better with these stories because it's a level of sophistication that I've always modeled myself after, so it always clicks with me, these stories. I think my first introduction to this, maturity and sophistication was with Love Jones. That's one of my favorite movies ever. And not just specifically for the spoken word, but just, again, we had people of color who were college educated, still remember their background, are still very much connected to their background via their families. But nonetheless, they have their own lives. And it's not centered in proving themselves like, I'm a good person, look, I'm hardworking. They just are. They're college educated. They've gone through all the trials and tribulation of just being an American citizen. And their love lives. Their love lives, their professional lives, their lives in general. Which I have not really genuinely seen for the Latino culture. It doesn't exist for Afro-Latinas, for Latinas, for Asian mix of Latina, whatever. I just haven't seen it. It's always kind of, the shows that are pushed out are always centered on living with a big family, and that does happen, don't get me wrong, but here we see just people living their lives, and it's not necessarily connected. They still have connections to their families, but not so much like the Latino narrative. But aside from that, I want to say there's a lot of similarities. I feel like, if we're really going to nitpick it, there is a lot of similarities between this show and Living Single, even Girlfriends. Remember Girlfriends on UPN? I believe that was the acronym for that channel, but nonetheless, it's where regular television didn't allow for Living Single to have really opened its vernacular to the possibilities of professionalism, of personal lives. It was always hinted at, and nonetheless it was very sitcom-y, so it was always going to have a nice little pretty ribbon at the end. But this is a lot more complex, a lot more raunchier. I don't want to compare it to Sex and the City. It is not. Not every quartet are we going to, always compare to that particular foursome, or the Golden Girls. I mean, I feel like all these shows kind of take from their predecessor, but they make it their own. They have their own lived experience and then bring that approach to these stories. So We have our introduction of Ella McFair, which would be our Khadijah, right? She's a journalist and she's an author, very young and ambitious, 32. You know, hey, she's pushing out books. Have they fared well? Not necessarily, but girl is on her game, on her grind and making it. Her personal life, you know, unfortunately, is a little on the because I mean she is living her best single life, but there was one man in particular that I think he was her everything, and I guess he would be the equivalent of Big, but I think it's funny, one of the characters who plays her friend, I was like, Big, no, this is not your Big, because Big was or billionaire and had a chauffeur, and this cat ain't it. Her ex's name is Anderson, and he leaves, I believe he works for the Peace Corps or something, and he leaves for Ella for a 2-year commitment to help. But unfortunately, the way he breaks up with her, it's not in the most nicest of ways, and so he is quickly labeled Satan. So, you know, we do that with anybody who breaks our heart, right? Now we have Sandy Hill, which I would say she's our Sinclair, because she even has an Obie, which would be her Matthew in the show. Now, but she's no, like, you know, country bumpkin like Sinclair. And Sinclair had heart, but she was very dreamy, like, remember her passion for trolls. This is not Sandy. Sandy is a PhD advisee with a focus in African American studies. Her boyfriend is a professor at the university that she's currently working and attending. So, no, they are not that. I feel like certain roles switched, and I'll get into that. Let's jump into Whitney, who would, I guess, I mean, she's our banker. Whitney is the more, you know, I don't know, I guess she's a little on the full of herself kind of thing, and she is a banker, so she does very well. Her husband, or soon-to-be husband, excuse me, is Ola. You know, Nigerian American, but very thick on the Nigerian culture, which again I love, because we see these instances of culture that are not just like placed there to, you know, to be a check mark. It's integrated into the story, so keep that in mind. So if we're dealing with this kind of coupling, would we say, because personality wise, well, professional wise, let me get into that. Professional wise, Whitney would be kind of Maxine Shaw, and then Ola would have to be Cal Barker, but they're not. They're really not. So that's why I feel like Sandy and Whitney switched. So, you know, what would be typical of living single, like they switched around the professions, but we're dealing with different kinds of personalities. But nonetheless, if we're really going to go down this like quartet and it matching to living single. And now finally we have our Renee. Renee is, I believe she works in publicity. She does very well for herself. And she would be our Regine. There's no difference here. Very full of herself, very self-involved. But if there is anything that's different, Renee is married to Jason. And again, not married to no slowpoke. She is self-involved, but she's very determined of how she wants to live her life. So she's in her early 30s, late 20s, and her husband is just as successful, has an MBA from Stanford. We're talking about buku dollars, but they go into their own personal turmoil. And of course we have Barb. Barb is Ella's boss and editor-in-chief, mainstream lifestyle publication. She is 45 and fabulous, and she is everything that Maxine Shaw was for us. I'm telling you, just seeing her and seeing her personality, her snarkiness, and her cynical behavior, it brings back memories, you know? That little banter she would always have with Regine, she has here with our Renee. So again, I feel like we're picking up where we may have left off in like mid to late 90s. All 6 episodes, I think, encompasses their lives of, you know, personal tragedies, I guess, and breakups. Renee's going through a divorce because she feels that she's been lied to, and we kind of see her unraveling because of it. And maybe that's why she's always bringing the attention back to her. Although Whitney is stressed as is, and is kind of realizing that maybe she's not prepared for marriage. She's not prepared to take on her fiance's influence and family and cultural life. That's not how she envisioned herself. Though she loves him, she's been with Olaf since they were teens. I'm assuming they're teenage sweethearts. So she's never dated outside of that. And for not allowing that to be a part of her life, then she's now left wondering of what if. And then that in itself is spiraling out of control because she ends up sleeping with somebody too damn quick, and she shouldn't. She should have, honestly, in my opinion, I don't think she should have gone there. She sleeps with Chris, who is a nice guy, but he is known on the show as community dick. So what does that tell you? Like, that's not somewhere you want to go. He's a fun time, but he doesn't necessarily have his stuff together, and he's just there for that purpose alone. So her friends have all tried him. Why does she feel compelled to do this? Maybe, again, just because she wanted to take some sense of control of what she wanted, what she desired, which she then soon regrets and is so tempted. We'll see, because I believe there's only 8 episodes in this series, so we'll see if she finally does get the nerve to tell Ola, and what does that spell out for their relationship. Ella in itself is kind of in a rut. Maybe she's making great money, but is she really pursuing what she wants as a book author? You know, she already put something out on the market, but it didn't do so great. She's working for Barb, but you know, I guess she feels that she could be doing more compelling work. And then she's brought back to her ex because her ex decides to pop up back into her life. Anderson is her kryptonite, basically. And we don't know now if necessarily they're going to become more committed, because for now it's kind of a hookup kind of thing, and you know, things like that fizzle out. But we'll see if this has any kind of longevity. You can see they genuinely care for each other, but again, they've already had a really bad breakup. So what potential we don't know which side of the pendulum this relationship is going to swing. So there's that. And then we have our Sandy character, who, you know, she is, you know, she's the girlfriend dating her, I guess, boss, and taking care of his child with another woman. So now she's taken on a home life that she may have not been prepared for. She's doing an excellent job as a stepmom because she gets along with his child very, very well. But there is that, like, you know, okay, is this gonna go deeper? Are we gonna get serious? Although they are keeping at the beginning of the series, they're keeping their relationship quiet because he can run the risk of being fired. You are not to date staff. That's known for most of universities, but nonetheless, someone does catch them kissing in some vulnerable moment. She may have had a couple of nutcrackers, which I loved. Again, they introduced those elements of New York that if you're a New Yorker, you know what a nutcracker is. So she has a moment after keeping everything so perfect and airtight. No, we can only show affection behind closed doors, and she lets loose. Somebody spots them. So there is a moment where they have to defend their relationship to the university. They come clean. I don't necessarily know what happens soon after. He's fine, or is he put on probation? But he hosts a beautiful cocktail party in his brownstone, and she serves as hostess. And then there's this one lady that shows a lot of shade that you're kind of like, what? Her character name is Donda Baptiste, and she's a professor as well. Now she kind of kind of like rubs it in, that like, oh honey, you're not the first, and at least you cook better than the last one. What does that mean? Is that coming from jealousy and envy? Maybe she wanted this professor for herself and maybe could never land him, and so she's gonna kind of throw shade her way, to Shandi's way, Sandy's way, sorry. And then she mentions this horrible term. I mean, but I don't know. It depends on your level of feminism, because she says, well, we're all allowed a fuck up. And at first you take it as like, oh, okay, yeah, we all mess up, whatever. But she means like fucking up, like upgrading. So she makes it very clear. She's like, well, honey, you shouldn't feel bad about the circumstance, because if you're fucking somebody, that's going to benefit you at some future point. And which kind of makes you think like, I mean, these are concerns that most women talk about in private. And that's why I applaud the writing on this show, because I think it makes it very clear that, you're not just one particular way, that you're not always professional, you're not always perfect in your personal life, that there are moments where you find yourself in these introspections where you're thinking about certain things about your personal life. And there's even the last episode encompasses Rosie O'Donnell as their therapist, as their shared therapist, that they didn't even know they were all kind of consulting. And again, these are elements that need to also be shown on TV, which I love. Black therapy, or just going to therapy, that most, from what I gather and what I've seen, not a lot of black people are willing to go to therapy or to be that vulnerable. It's always kind of been like, I give it to God and it just kind of goes away and disappears. So I love that element of it, though I do agree with certain critics that have said that they should have placed a black therapist as opposed to Rosie O'Donnell, which I don't necessarily know why. Maybe because she was a name, and I get that's becoming a common theme. Like, if you want, the money and the support from the company, you need a name. But why couldn't they go with a black therapist? So many other black actors. But I don't know. I don't know if COVID had anything to do with this nonsense, so you need to correct that. Just saying.
When you attempt to make an episode where you're giving love to a historically black place, you have to really dive deep into the culture of it. And instead, they gave you hints of the culture of it. When you give people hints of the culture of it, people feel cheated.
Yeah,
I would love to have, this episode could have just been Whitney and her going to find the garments for her wedding, and that could have been an entire episode unto itself. The whole relationship with Anderson and Ella could have been an episode which you say this is like a love letter to Harlem type of an episode. So it makes me, as someone thinking critically about it, and when I compare this to other shows, I think of the episode, and unfortunately I know this is a bad comparison to make because this show is new and this other show has been on for years, but it reminded me of last season's episode of Insecure, when they did like a love letter to Compton, and they were doing everything around it, and they knew like in the end you can do the characters, you can have all of that, but you really got to highlight the community, because that's what people will care the most about, and that was the flaw in this episode, along with it feeling too.
Now, that's a snippet from Big Gold Belt Media, and I advise anybody who's watching this show to watch them. They really get into it. They get into details. But I want to say that falls in the same line, and that's in dedication to episode 4, I Love Harlem. I genuinely love that episode. But the way that they broke it down critically made me see it differently, because everybody who has a love for different sections of New York, that's their community. So I feel like however people see in the Heights, that's what I was kind of hinting at. And I wish I would have worded it better like this critic did. You have to do the research. You just do. If you really want the support, love and support of the community, that's what the people want to see themselves. We want you to delve into what the essence of the community is. And when you fail that, you feel cheated. So again, you can see it how you want to see it. I love the show. I'm 6 episodes in, and I believe there's 2 more. I highly recommend it. I think it's great, and great writing. And I feel like we need more stories like this, and more stories directed to the Latino culture and Afro-Latino culture, which is missing from the market. I also wanted to give nod to another show that I've liked. Idris Elba is in it. In The Long Run, I've also loved that show. I think it's already 3 seasons in, but I